Here is another false swipe gaming theorem, this time centered around everyone's favorite terrible legendary, Regigigas, and its defining trait, which is again, that it's terrible. Just why is it so bad, you ask? Because of its ability. Abilities are wondrous things in the world of competitive Pokemon. They can sit to the side uselessly like Skarmory in Gen 3, they can be a solid feature of an already good Pokemon, or they can be so impactful they more or less create a Pokemon's viability by themselves. And of course, they can drag an otherwise good Pokemon into uselessness, a la Regigigas. Today we're going over Pokemon that were defined in large part or nearly entirely by their excellent abilities. If not necessarily make or break level, they'd at the very least be quite different without them. So let's dive right into the Regigigas theorem, named for Regigigas the Terrible. But first, give yourself the internet protection ability because this video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Surfshark is an app and browser extension that allows you to place your computer or phone virtually in any country as if you're actually there. Surfshark has over 3,200 plus servers in 65 countries. And Surfshark, being a VPN, of course, encrypts your data to keep you safe so you can rest easy when having to use public Wi-Fi. In fact, it can even help you use your programs that these Wi-Fis might block. Whenever I travel, I don't like bringing my editing PC. It's way too big. So I usually use a remote desktop app to control it on the go. Sometimes hotel internet blocks my remote desktop app for reasons, but thanks to Surfshark, I can bypass this block and get back to working on the go. And as always, Surfshark allows you to unlock region lock content by connecting to a server in a different country. Now you can supercharge your choice of streaming services and get even more content. So if you want a sick VPN and also support the channel to help us produce more content, get an exclusive Surfshark deal by entering promo code FALSESWIPE or clicking the link in the description below and get Surfshark VPN for an extra 3 months for free. Passive damage is one of the most defining, powerful, shaping forces in competitive Pokemon. It's so powerful because pretty much every Pokemon is affected in some way, and this is huge in keeping some of the most dangerous Pokemon in the game in check. Think of how mighty Pokemon like Arceus, Normal, Kyogre, and Darkrai, powerful though they may be, will take a not insignificant 12.5% hit from each switch into Stealth Rock, to say nothing of Spikes and or Toxic Spikes, Burn, Poison, Leech Seed, and Sandstorm. With just Stealth Rock in the picture, your attack which hits these Pokemon for 90% or so has a chance to KO them outright, whereas before you'd be out of luck barring a lucky critical hit. Passive damage is so strong and so easy to take advantage of, many teams are built entirely around abusing it, and even teams that are all-out offensive don't exactly skimp on the passive damage either. After all, what do hyper offense teams do before they start sending out their sluggers? They set up Stealth Rock, of course. With this in mind, it should be no surprise that an ability which ignores the effects of passive damage would be powerful, but the stratospheric heights to which Magic Guard has propelled its most well-known users, Clefable, Reuniclus, and Alakazam, 3 of the 4 fully evolved Pokemon with the ability, demonstrates just how incredible it is and how much we take passive damage for granted in dealing with other Pokemon. Because when we aren't able to chip the Magic Guarders, then we're not damaging at all, and that results in them being among the scariest Pokemon in the game, having had their bans called for on a number of occasions across many metagames. Before Clefable and Alakazam had Magic Guard, they weren't much of a big deal, but after receiving it, they rocketed it into the pantheon of elite Pokemon. It makes sense that we are so reliant on passive damage. After all, preparing for many individual Pokemon simultaneously is quite difficult, but the Magic Guarders completely throw such ideas out the window and force you to engage with them directly. To make matters even worse, most counters to Magic Guard Pokemon are themselves vulnerable to hazards, which make it incredibly easy for Magic Guarders to outlast their answers, and this often leads the best answer being to duel the opposing Magic Guarder with your own Magic Guarder. As a result, several generations began to evolve entirely around Magic Guard, with teams' strategies revolving around cramming as many Magic Guard Pokemon as they could onto their team. Gen 5 OU has even seen people using Duocean and Kadabra just to have another version of their fully evolved forms. That's absolutely ridiculous. Meanwhile, Gen 4 Clefable, without almost any resist at all, courtesy of still being a normal type, became one of the most defining forces in OU, eclipsing Blissey through its unmatched resilience, which allowed it to last throughout a game better, to the extent extent that it didn't matter, it wasn't anywhere near Blissey in terms of bulk. It even found a niche in the insanely powerful Gen 4 Ubers for this same reason, just because it ignored the spikes and toxic spikes littering the tier. The 4th fully evolved Magic Garter, Sigilith, isn't quite at the level of the others, not being as strong or bulky, and the added weaknesses of its dual typing can be annoying, but that's only as far as OU is concerned. It has been a force for many generations in the lower tiers, so long as passive damage is key, and barring some serious fundamental changes to the game of Pokemon, it always will be. Then Magic Guard will be one of the most elite abilities in the game, being the most significant driving part of the role of whichever Pokemon is lucky enough to have it. It can be difficult to maintain health in the face of all the damage flying at you over the course of a battle. Whether direct or indirect, even Pokemon blessed with recovery moves still have to spend a turn using them, which can be exploitable. It can mean a free turn for the opponent as the recovery move is forced, as opposed to using a more threatening move or switching oneself. With Regenerator, you get a whopping 1/3 of your health back just for switching out. Regenerator is fantastic to assuage the pressure from entry hazards. Even the Stealth Rock weak Tornadus Theorem actually gains health switching into rocks, for instance. And if they aren't being pressured by hazards, made more and more possible over generations with increased defog distribution and then heavy-duty boots, then regen Pokemon becomes some of the most famously unkillable Pokemon around. They are so excellent because the freedom afforded them by Regenerator makes playing against them much more constricting. The most common example, a Pokemon like Slowbro will switch into a physical attacker like Dragonite and take around 30% or so. Dragonite will run away as Slowbro will pressure the switch in with Scald, or Scout with Teleport, or use Thunder Wave or whatever it wants to do, because that 30% it took will be completely healed off when it switches out. Contrast this with a defensive Pokemon without Regenerator. If it switched in and took 30% from a threat it checked, it'd soon be in range to where it would have to take a turn to heal itself, as opposed to pressuring the opponent in return somehow and thereby giving them room to apply pressure instead. Not Slowbro though. It will switch into that physical attacker again and again and again, and it will not get worn down to the point of needing to heal. And if that sounds too good to be true, consider the incredible longevity of the Tangrowth, Amoonguss, and Assault Vest Galarian Slowking, who don't even use recovery moves, yet are famous for their longevity and resilience in the face of threatening opposing attacks. The other example of amazing freedom afforded by Regenerator is that these Pokemon can stay in even on threats that will hit them for huge damage, because they're going to heal so much of it anyway. The most well-known example of this is Toxapex and its propensity for staying in on stab earthquakes from Landorus, Therian, and Garchomp. A Pokemon without Regenerator wouldn't dream of staying in such scenarios unless it was going to heal itself on the same turn, and even that would need a good reason. But with Regenerator, Toxapex can afford to eat the big hit from Earthquake and threaten them in return with Scald or Toxic or what have you. Then it'll switch out, get some more health back, come back in and switch once more, and it's in great health once again. This makes playing against Toxapex utterly nightmarish, not just because of its longevity, but because you can't assume it'll switch out with real certainty, since it very well could stay in, and that makes switching out an even easier move for the Pex user, since the opponent is so pressured into trying to get as much damage on it as possible to try and counteract the insanity of its Regenerator antics. Finally, while Regenerator is mostly known for making Pokemon like Alomomola and Slowking into defensive behemoths, its potential for enabling offensive threats is off the charts too. Tornadus Theory was banned from Gen 5 OU because Regenerator allowed it to switch in seemingly endlessly to break down opposing teams with Specs Hurricanes. Even with the shift to a more supporting roles in Gen 6 and beyond, it still often shows its capacity to actually threaten the opponent, and that's because it can stick around to batter away at them over and over. Mienshao has also shown great aptitude for this, mostly known for its talents in the lower tiers, but having had several ferocious showings in Gen 5 OU as well. These two are particularly nasty because they're so good at using U-turn, which goes hand in hand with Regenerator, an ability that becomes the defining force of each Pokemon that has it. Have we mentioned that Regigigas is terrible yet? Because if we haven't, well, Regigigas is terrible. This video is the Regigigas Theorem, but seeing as we have a video dedicated to how bad Regigigas was actually, as well as its spiritual twin Slacking, there is no need to once again dwell on the self-evident specifics for how horrendous such abilities are. They are completely crippling, leaving no viability for their users whatsoever in even the lowest tiers despite their incredible stat spreads. They're stronger and faster than Rayquaza with some nice bulk to boot, especially Gigas, who is an excellent hit taker, but they're among the worst Pokemon in the game. Talk about make or break. If you gave these Pokemon non-abilities like Illuminate, they'd be superb, and if you gave their abilities to Arceus, Arceus would drop to untiered. Moody is the definition of overpowered. It doesn't just remove player interaction and leave games to chance, it leaves them to chance that is overwhelmingly in favor of the Moody user. The random stat boosting can be fished for repeatedly via substitute and protect until, as was demonstrated repeatedly, even Bidoof would sweep teams and Ubers. Yes, that's right, consult how good was Bibarel actually for more information. If it breaks Bidoof, well, that's the power of abilities for you. Wonder Guard is an obvious monstrosity of an ability designed only for a Pokemon with literally 1 HP. The fact Shedinja has actually had niches before, most famously walling Kyogre in Gen 4 Ubers, is testament to how ridiculously good only being damaged by super effective moves is. Of course, Shedinja is a terrible Pokemon in spite of this, as Bug Ghost means it's got plenty of weaknesses, so most teams will naturally have no shortage of moves to hit it super effectively, and is also OHKO'd by Stealth Rock, Spikes, Toxic Leech Seed, Will-O-Wisp, and Sandstorm. Well, Hail too, but that's at least rare. Still, no matter what it does, like equip heavy-duty boots for hazards in Gen 8, Shedinja is always going to have a million ways to bypass its insane ability. It also doesn't help that it is very slow and not particularly powerful either, so it's not exactly pressuring the opponent in return. Zoroark's illusion is an ability so powerful, it brought Team Preview into existence. Without it, the game of Pokemon would become an ontological nightmare. You'd almost never know if you were facing a Zoroark right from turn 1. With Team Preview, it becomes much more manageable. Though not to say it can't still be pulled off. The only reason it doesn't tend to work out much is because Zoroark is not a very impressive Pokemon in its own right. The fact Zoroark has ever had any niche at all is because of the absurd possibilities offered by pretending to be another Pokemon. In Generation 5, Superior was a good NU Pokemon, but nothing more than that. Its terrific speed and interesting support move pool, alongside deceptively solid natural bulk, wasn't nearly enough to compensate for its lackluster special attack. In Generation 6, however, it received the ability that changed everything for it. Contrary reverses every would-be stat change. If a Contrary Pokemon gets intimidated, instead of -1 attack, it gains +1 attack. If a Contrary Pokemon uses Calm Mind, it actually drops its special attack and defense by 1 instead of boosting them. What this meant for Superior in particular is that it could now freely unleash its strongest move, Leaf Storm, and instead of the usual harsh special attack drop of 2 stages, it would gain +2 special attack instead. Basically, its strongest move also turned into Nasty Plot. Plus, being able to launch such a high base power move helped compensate for Superior's initially low special attack against the many water types it threatened. And after just that one boost, it became utterly terrifying, possessing the brutal capacity to snowball out of control incredibly quickly. As a +2 Leaf Storm hit incredibly hard and would bring Superior to +4 in the process. Making Superior even nastier to deal with was its aforementioned support move pool. It especially loved paralyzing its checks with Glare and had all sorts of other useful tools like Knock Off, Taunt, Leech Seed, and in Gen 7, Defog. However, it was all thanks to Contrary, which allowed Superior to basically have a grass-type combination of Nasty Plot and Draco Meteor, becoming one of the most freely spammable and dangerous attacks around. As a bonus, Contrary even allowed Superior to punish opposing Defog, since the move ordinarily drops the opponent's evasion, but against, click the move at your own peril. The last thing you want to do is to start missing accurate moves on a Pokemon that needs only 1 turn to run away with the entire game. Now, Contrary won't automatically fix all of a Pokemon's issues, but it sure helps. For example, Spinda is going to be terrible almost no matter what, and Shuckle isn't going to get much use out of it, but Malamar and Lurantis have etched out solid places for themselves in the lower tiers with the ability. Using it to turn Superpower from a strong move lacking in spammability through its attack and defense dropping into basically gaining a bulk up with each use. They also love being physical attackers who actually welcome being intimidated. Overall though, Contrary is by and large the superior show. Abilities that strengthen their users tend to be responsible for some of the most vicious Pokemon around, and there is no shortage of them. From Sheer Force Landorus to Download Genesect to Adaptability Crawdon to many others. So we'll focus on 2 examples, the most extreme and the most recent. The former can be seen in the case of Azumarill and Medicham, whose access to the attack doubling huge and pure power catapult them from pitifully weak to some of the most monstrous Pokemon around, packing attack stats well over 400. Even Even Mega Medicham, which famously one-hit KO seemingly everything in its path 6 times over, wouldn't be anything impressive without pure power, nor would the similarly powerful Mega Mawile for that matter, which was so overbearing upon its debut in Generation 6 that it got sent to Ubers with a non-stab Sucker Punch that outdamaged Arceus' stab extreme speed. If Sucker Punch hadn't had its power nerfed in a subsequent generation, it's not unlikely Mega Mawile would have been banned again. Early Generation 9 was also characterized by similar abilities, which wound up sending Xian Pao and Qiyu to Ubers. They didn't power themselves up, but rather lowered the defensive stats of the opponent, which had the identical effect of making their hits incredibly difficult to withstand. Finally, to circle back to Extremity and Overkill, Galarian Darmanitan's Guerrilla Tactics took an already strong Pokemon and made its power laughably over the top. Clearly, Game Freak forgot about the balancing factor of distributing these abilities somewhere down the line. And now here's our honorable mention section. These are abilities that don't fully make the Pokemon, but are very important. We take Levitate for granted, but it really is one of the most astonishingly good abilities in the game, as gaining an immunity to Earthquake, Spikes, Toxic Spikes, and Sticky Web is absurdly good. It is basically receiving one of the best traits of flying types without having to take on their weaknesses. Pokemon like the Laddies and Rotom Wash wouldn't become unviable or anything of sort if they were to lose Levitate, especially since they'd probably gain a decent ability to replace it, but they'd be very, very different. Both of these Pokemon are ferocious physical attackers with great typing offensively and defensively, as well as excellent priority, but it's their abilities that really elevate them to the highest level. With Defiant providing a +2 attack bonus upon a stat drop, Bisharp basically gets a free Swords Dance if the opponent uses the Fog and drops its evasion, which is an amazing way to punish hazard removal. Furthermore, it can't be punished by Intimidate, since it will initially go to -1 attack, but it will then get +2, effectively meaning Intimidate gives it a +1 attack boost. With Supreme Overlord boosting its attack for each of his teammates that's fainted, King Gambit creates similar win-win situations. Insanely strong as they may make their users, the downside of Choice Band and Specs is not just that they force a lock of one move, but that they can be scouted safely with Protect, which also tends to allow the Protect user to rack up some leftovers recovery. With Unseen Fist, Urshifu blasts past any use of Protect, making its already terrifying Choice Band set nearly riskless. It's a monster of a Pokemon either way, but Unseen Fist really pushes it over the edge. Field conditions are some of the most defining aspects of competitive Pokemon, and while some of them like Trick Room are quite good, they're also hurt by the necessity of manual setup. Abilities that bring these conditions with them upon entry are thus incredibly useful. P.S. We're still waiting for the Trick Room ability, and the Gravity one too. Competitive Pokemon, especially singles, is built around switching. It's part of what differentiates it from in-game, where your opponent will never run away from a bad matchup and just lets themselves get KO'd. Trapping moves can sometimes work, but seeing as the opponent can switch on the turn you use it, you can't guarantee you'll get the target you want. That's why trapping abilities are so powerful. They force that exact situation. They enable some of the most terrifying offense around. Dragon types, for example, become even more monstrous than they already are when steel types like Skarmory are taken out of the picture by Magnezone, and Zone Steel Killing is a rather tame example. Considering how wider reach of Arena Tramp and Shadow Tag is so fundamentally overpowered, the abilities have been banned in their entirety across multiple generations. Ever since Tyranitar and its Sand redefined the shape and pace of the OU metagame in Gen 3, as did Groudon and Kyogre in Ubers, weather-inducing abilities have been an enormous part of the competitive landscape. Even when their effects cease to be permanent in Generation 6, they continue to be incredibly important. Weather is so powerful that many Pokemon and teams are willing to take a turn to set it up manually, but when you have the option to do so automatically just by switching in, that makes things much easier. Whether it's supporting teammates a la Politoed or using the weather for its own benefits a la Mega Charizard Y, or a mix of both a la Tyranitar, weather is so effective. Even generally less valuable Pokemon like Ninetales will find a niche if they can set it up. Psychic Surge, Electric Surge, Grassy Surge, Misty Surge, terrains actually existed as far back as Generation 6, but they could only be summoned manually, which made using them awkward, as they weren't quite impactful enough to warrant a move slot and a turn of use. Well, unless you were into gimmicky Xerneas sets. When the Tapus unleashed them in Gen 7 though, they changed the entire game, providing some of the best team support around. Obviously, it helps that the Tapus are amazing Pokemon, but even weaker Pokemon like Indeedee F and Pincurchin have found legitimate niches for their terrain setting capabilities. In conclusion, abilities are among the most defining forces in competitive Pokemon. They are so strong they can often shape the entirety of a Pokemon's niche. The ones mentioned in this video are the standouts, but consider how even elite Pokemon that aren't defined fully by their ability still rely on it heavily. Just imagine if Heatran lost Flash Fire or if Ferrothorn lost Iron Barbs. Whenever something is elite, especially to the point of being suspect or ban-worthy, odds are its ability plays at least some role in it. Even Magearna's Soul Heart makes it more difficult to answer, for example. But above all else, remember, an ability is what led to Bidoof sweeping teams in Ubers and to Regigigas, king of the mighty golems, not doing a single thing and being, well, terrible. In singles anyways. Did you see what happened in VGC when they paired it with a Pokemon that could remove its stupid ability? It instantly saw use. Thanks for watching, everyone. And as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to Full Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And in the comments, I want to know, what did you think about our list? Were there any abilities you thought we should have talked about? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. Also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.